You think giving her attention will win her over. You think being available, kind, and real will make her stay. But the harder you try, the faster she drifts away. The problem isn't her, it's your strategy. Today I'll show you how to flip the game, how to make her chase you, obsess over you, and fear losing you, without saying a single desperate word. In the game of attraction, power is not about dominance in the physical sense. It's about psychological presence. It is not declared. It is not screamed. True power is perceived, and those who master the subtle art of presence become magnetic. If you want her to obsess over you, you must first stop trying to impress her. The more effort you show, the more you leak your internal hunger. And hunger, in her eyes, is weakness. Women are hardwired to detect desperation, no matter how well it's hidden under charm, flattery, or persistence. They feel it, and once they do, the chase dies. This is where most men fail. They overcommunicate. They reveal too much, too soon. They seek validation in her approval, and in doing so, become prisoners of her perception. The very moment you try to prove yourself to her, you admit, silently and unconsciously, that you do not believe you are enough without her recognition, that you need her gaze to feel significant, that she has the power, and you are asking, begging, to be seen. But the man who understands perception understands something deeper. The woman must sense that you are above her reach, even when you're near, that your presence is not a gift handed out freely, but a reward given only to the few who are worthy. Power is not just how you act, it is in what you withhold. You must withhold your full story, your constant availability, and most importantly, your emotional need for her attention. This is the beginning of psychological leverage. You do not convince her to value you. You force her to observe your value. You position yourself where your time is scarce, your emotions are measured, and your focus remains fixed on something beyond her. She must see that your world does not revolve around her, that she is not your goal, rather a side character entering your domain. You are not the beggar at the gate. You are the gatekeeper. You are the architect of the encounter. The more you appear unaffected by her charm, the more curious she becomes about your internal world. A man who is not swayed by beauty is either emotionally unavailable or dangerously high in value. And women are drawn to the mystery of the second. This is the game within the game to become the enigma she cannot easily solve. When she realizes you are not moved by her attempts, she will begin to question herself. Why doesn't he respond like the others? Why does his silence feel so loud? Why do I care? And that is exactly what you want, to create a psychological vacuum. When you are not chasing her, she is left alone with her thoughts. And thoughts, when unchallenged, turn into obsession. Every unanswered message, every delayed reply, every moment of perceived emotional distance builds tension. She imagines scenarios, overanalyzes words, and begins constructing a version of you that's far greater than anything you could have told her directly. Silence, when used correctly, is louder than any flattery. This is not about being rude or cold. This is about control, about calculated indifference. You give just enough to keep the connection alive, but not enough for her to feel secure. You disrupt the modern pattern where women are accustomed to endless validation. You become the anomaly, the man she can't quite predict, the man who makes her question her influence. And in this uncertainty, obsession breeds. You must embody the idea that your life is full, with or without her, that you are moving toward goals that have nothing to do with her existence. She must sense that even if she were to leave today, your world would remain intact, unbothered, unchanged. This emotional self-sufficiency is rare, and it's dangerous. It sends a message you are complete, and those who are complete are terrifying to those who need control. When a woman sees that she cannot shake you, she becomes compelled to figure out why, and in trying to understand you, she begins to think about you. And the more she thinks, the more power you acquire. Not through force, through mental occupation. You're not present in her life physically, but you live rent-free in her mind, not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't say. Not because of what you gave, but because of what you denied. A man of perceived power is not chasing women. He is being studied by them. They observe how he moves, how he speaks, how he disappears and returns with perfect timing. His distance is not a game, it is strategy. His presence is not desperate, It is chosen, and when he chooses to offer it, it feels like a reward, not an expectation. This shift is crucial, because the woman who once felt in control now questions her influence. And that doubt is the beginning of psychological addiction. Power must be perceived, not pleaded for. This principle will remain unchanged across time, culture, and psychology. Once you understand this, once you stop seeking and start attracting by withholding, you shift the dynamic permanently. Mystery is not weakness. Mystery is not absence of personality or depth. Mystery is controlled disclosure, a tool of power used by those who understand that obsession is born not from knowing too much, but from knowing just enough. In today's world, where everyone overshares, where people post every thought and feeling, where availability is mistaken for connection, a man who holds back becomes rare, and in his rarity, he becomes dangerous. Women are naturally drawn to puzzles, not ones they can solve instantly, but the ones that linger in their minds long after the interaction is over. When she can't place you, she can't replace you. Men who lay everything out in the open lose power the moment they do. They believe vulnerability wins her over. They tell their entire story, expose their feelings, show all their cards within days of meeting her. And though their intentions may be pure, the effect is predictable. She loses interest, not because they were not worthy, but because they were too accessible. Accessibility, when excessive, leads to emotional fatigue. When nothing is left to the imagination, curiosity dies, and without curiosity, obsession cannot exist. Mystery is a slow burn. It is the tension between what she sees and what she thinks she sees. You give her enough to become intrigued, but never enough to feel certainty. The man who speaks in straight lines is quickly understood. The man who speaks in riddles, who answers indirectly, who sometimes pauses before responding, not because he is confused, but because he chooses his words carefully. That man becomes a fixation. His silence speaks volumes. His slight smile, his vague stories, his lack of emotional overreaction, they build an image of control. You must become like a locked door in her mind. She knows there is something valuable on the other side, but she cannot quite open it. So she keeps trying. Every interaction must leave a residue of incompletion. When she walks away from you, she should feel slightly unsettled. Not because you mistreated her, because she didn't figure you out. This is the space where obsession is cultivated. You are not a book to be read in one sitting. You are a labyrinth. The deeper she walks into your mystery, the more invested she becomes. Do not rush to explain yourself. Let her assume. Let her create narratives in her head. Humans hate gaps in logic. We need resolution. So when you present yourself as a contradiction, calm but intense, present but distant, kind but unbothered, she will be compelled to make sense of you. This is where you win. Because the moment she starts analyzing, she starts thinking. And the more she thinks about you, the more emotionally involved she becomes. Even if the interaction was brief, mystery also creates fear of loss. She will not know where she stands with you, and that emotional uncertainty triggers the deepest psychological response: fear of disconnection from value. You must never make her feel like she's already won you. As soon as she feels complete ownership, the game ends. She must believe that your interest can vanish at any moment, that your time is limited, that your attention is not guaranteed. This fear is not cruelty, it's psychological conditioning. The scarcity of your emotional presence makes it precious. And when she finally gets a moment of connection, when you show rare vulnerability, when you share something real, even small, it hits 10 times harder because she's been starving for it. If you always offer deep connection, it becomes background noise. But if you offer it like a rare gift, it creates an emotional high. You become the source of her dopamine, the one person who can make her feel deeply alive, but only in measured doses. That's where addiction begins. Never underestimate the power of silence. When she sends a long message and you take hours to reply, or you reply with brevity and calm, you are teaching her something you do not chase, you do not explain, and you do not overinvest. This breeds respect. It shows her that you are in control of your emotions, your time, and your attention. You are not reacting. You are choosing. And in a world full of men who beg, compliment, and overcompensate, you are the one who forces her to wonder. The greatest advantage mystery gives you is time. While others burn quickly in shallow excitement, your presence lingers in her mind. She revisits conversations in her head. She replays your expressions, your pauses, your unpredictability. And every time she does, you gain psychological ground. Not by doing more, but by doing less. You let her mind do the work for you. You do not have to explain why you're different. She begins to feel it. And feeling always overrides logic. Mystery, when used correctly, creates power that no amount of words can achieve. It is not a flaw. It is your shield, your weapon, your silent magnetism. It separates you from the masses and forces her to keep coming back, looking for a clarity that you never quite give. The man who masters himself becomes irresistible, not because of what he gives, but because of what he refuses to lose. In a world where reactions are instant, emotions are worn on sleeves, and validation is currency, emotional control is rare. And what is rare becomes valuable. If you want her to obsess over you, not merely desire you in passing, you must demonstrate a level of composure that makes her question her own emotional state. Her chaos must meet your calm. Her drama must be absorbed by your stillness. Her emotional highs and lows must crash against your unmoved center. It is here that she begins to feel something deeper than attraction. She begins to feel psychological gravity. Emotional control does not mean coldness. It means selectivity. It means not giving every mood, impulse, or insecurity the permission to dominate your behavior. Most men collapse at the first sign of resistance. A delayed reply sends them spiraling. A missed call becomes a crisis. A vague comment throws them off balance. And in reacting impulsively, emotionally, without discipline, they reveal their core unstable, needy, and easy to shake. No woman obsesses over a man she can emotionally predict or manipulate. Obsession is born when she is uncertain of her hold over you. To remain composed in the face of emotional storms is to project power without words. When she tests you, through silence, distance, passive aggression, or emotional provocation, she is not trying to destroy the connection. She is trying to feel something. She is trying to see where she stands. And if your emotional state wavers every time she shifts, you communicate dependency. But if you hold your frame, if you remain undisturbed, she begins to sense something she didn't expect. You are not orbiting her world. She is orbiting yours. A man who is emotionally reactive is a man who can be controlled. If she can make you chase, beg, plead, or explode, then she knows she owns you. No matter what words you say, and the moment she owns you, the game is over. You are no longer a mystery, no longer a challenge, no longer a presence that commands psychological weight. You become another one of the countless men who surrendered their center in the pursuit of approval. But when you remain rooted, when your tone is calm, when your words are measured, and your presence is steady, you become something she didn't anticipate, a mirror reflecting her own emotional instability. And few things are more addictive than someone who makes you confront your own chaos. The more stable you are, the more she becomes fascinated. Because most of what she's known are men who either suppress their emotions poorly or let their emotions dictate their worth. You, however, operate above that frequency. You choose when to reveal, when to react, and when to disengage. Even in moments of disagreement, tension, or confusion, your power is preserved by how little you flinch. You don't raise your voice to prove dominance. You don't chase to soothe her insecurity. You don't explain yourself endlessly to avoid being misunderstood. Instead, you let your composure speak for itself. You become unshakable. And the more she tries to find a crack in your armor, the more she becomes consumed by the effort. She begins to question why she cannot affect you the way others do. And that questioning becomes mental fixation. Your emotional restraint makes her feel your presence even in silence. While most men try to maintain attention through constant words, compliments, or validation, you maintain it through tension. Emotional tension is the invisible string that keeps her thinking. It's what makes her replay your conversations. It's what makes her wonder what you're really thinking. It's what makes her miss you without understanding why. Because every time she tries to pull something out of you and fails, she goes deeper into the desire to unlock you. The reality is, women do not want to lead emotionally. They test, they provoke, they destabilize, but only to see if you can hold your ground. If you pass the test, you rise in value. If you fail, you blend into the background. Your ability to remain indifferent to chaos is what builds trust. Not surface-level trust, but deep, instinctual trust. The kind that makes her feel safe in your presence and terrified to lose your attention. Emotional control is also the gateway to selective vulnerability. When you do finally open up, when you choose to show something real, it doesn't come across as weakness, but as a gift. A rare glimpse into the mind she's been trying to decipher. It lands with force because it's earned. And the fact that you could remain silent for so long and chose to open up in that moment makes it unforgettable. Your silence becomes a stage. Your composure becomes the performance. Your emotional depth becomes the story she wants to hear, again and again, but never gets the whole plot. You don't just want to be attractive, you want to be unforgettable. And that begins with emotional sovereignty, with self-command, with the ability to make her feel something she can't quite define. That is the essence of obsession. Not lust, not admiration, but psychological dependence on your presence, your calm, and your mind. When she sees that nothing shakes you, she will keep returning to you, not because you begged, but because your control became the very thing she lost control over. In every dynamic between man and woman, there exists an unspoken economy, the economy of attention. Whoever controls it controls the entire game. And in this economy, most men are bankrupt before they even realize there's a transaction taking place. They give too much, too fast. They spend their time, their energy, their focus like desperate gamblers hoping for a return. But the moment a woman senses that your attention is freely available, unearned, constant, and emotionally hungry, you lose all leverage. You become familiar, predictable, and worst of all, replaceable. Power belongs to the one who is least affected, the one who gives the impression that their time is sacred, that their attention must be earned, not assumed, that they are not easily moved by appearance, flirtation, or temporary emotional connection. When a woman realizes that your attention cannot be bought with beauty, flattery, or validation-seeking behavior, you instantly separate yourself from the masses. You stop being one of many and become the one she can't quite access. When a man understands that his attention is not just a form of kindness, but a weapon of control, everything shifts. He no longer reacts to every message. He does not jump to reply. He does not explain his silence. He allows tension to build, because he knows that what is rare becomes wanted. And when a woman is unsure of your emotional availability, she begins to invest. Not because you pressured her to, because you've positioned your attention as something she has to win. That pursuit plants the seed of obsession. She must feel that your focus is not a default setting, that your mind is not easily occupied, that your time is not just another hour on a schedule, but a kingdom with gates. And those gates do not open for everyone. Most men act like beggars in this economy, desperate for recognition, for affection, for acknowledgement. But a man who behaves like a king, whose attention is precise, measured, and intentional, becomes psychologically magnetic. She doesn't just want you. She wants to matter to you. And when she doesn't know whether she does, that unknown becomes the driving force behind her obsession. This is where subtlety becomes strategy. You do not ignore her outright. You do not play childish games of coldness. Instead, you treat your time and energy with reverence. When you speak, it's deliberate. When you listen, focused. But when you withdraw, it's without apology. This contrast creates intensity. It makes every moment of your engagement feel more valuable. Because they are unpredictable, and unpredictability breeds mental fixation. Attention is also emotional reinforcement. Whatever you reward with attention, you validate. If you reward drama, she learns to use chaos to get your focus. If you reward beauty alone, she learns that appearance is enough. But if you only give deep attention when she shows emotional intelligence, composure, or respect, she begins to align with what you reinforce. She becomes more thoughtful, more measured, more invested in understanding your standards. And all of this happens without a single direct instruction from you. Because attention teaches louder than words. Control over attention also means control over rhythm. Most men operate on her rhythm. They respond when she reaches out. They adjust their pace to match hers. They become emotionally entrained to her mood swings. But a man of psychological strategy sets the tempo. He decides when the interaction begins and ends. He knows when to pull back, not out of cruelty, but to increase the value of re-entry. Every disappearance makes the next appearance more powerful. Every withdrawal is a lesson in scarcity. Every delay is an elevation in status. Understand that a woman does not obsess over men who are constantly available. She obsesses over men whose attention she once tasted, but can no longer access on command. The inconsistency isn't a flaw, it's a formula. It keeps her guessing, keeps her analyzing, keeps her wondering. And in that wondering, her thoughts loop back to you. Not because you said something groundbreaking, but because your absence speaks louder than presence. This is why silence becomes a communication tool. A day without a message becomes a statement. A pause before replying becomes a test of her emotional endurance. A cold glance in a warm room becomes a challenge she must understand. And when she does get your attention, when your eyes finally focus, when your voice finally softens, it lands with emotional weight. Because it is rare. Because she had to earn it. Because every moment of attention from you feels like a reward, not a routine. Attention must also be protected from emotional neediness. The moment she senses you need her attention back, the power shifts. You must train yourself to enjoy detachment, to feel whole without the validation loop, to be so focused on your own internal mission that her emotional fluctuations do not sway your course. That unshakable presence makes you unignorable, because while others chase her shadow, you stand still, and in that stillness, she begins to question why your absence disturbs her more than anyone else's attention ever satisfied her. She begins to crave the very things she once took for granted. In the end, attention is not just about presence. It's about perception. When she perceives your focus as rare, deliberate, and emotionally detached from outcome, she will fight to become the exception. She will chase the feeling of being chosen by a man who does not choose easily. And that pursuit does not create affection. It creates obsession. In the shadowed corridors of power and desire, it is not the man who loves loudest that captures the mind of a woman. It is the man who commands without begging, moves without explaining, and seduces without surrendering. What drives her to obsession is not flowers or compliments, but mystery wrapped in self, control, status anchored in silence, and attention wielded like a blade, sharp, selective, and always on your terms. If you understand that her obsession is not born in your constant availability, but in the subtle dance of psychological dominance, you begin to master the art that few dare even to glimpse. You no longer compete for her affection. You make her compete for your approval. You reverse the emotional economy. You become not a participant in her world, but the architect of a world she longs to enter. This isn't about manipulation. It's about awareness. Awareness of how human nature operates. Awareness of what truly compels desire to turn into fixation. And when you combine high value with emotional control, restraint with presence, scarcity with intensity, you become unforgettable. Not to her heart, to her mind. And once you live in her mind, you live in her forever. That is how obsession is created, not through force, but through strategy. Not through chaos, but through calibrated power. Not by trying to own her, but by becoming the one she cannot own.